Hey, this is Jeff, and we need to talk. There's been a lot of misinformation about vaping, e-liquid, and nicotine recently, so I thought I'd better set the record straight. Before I get started, there's no question that smoking cigarettes is bad for you. Cigarette smoke contains dozens of carcinogenic and/or highly toxic chemicals, but guess what? Nicotine isn't one of them. I mean, cigarette smoke obviously contains nicotine, but nicotine is one of the few things in it that doesn't cause cancer. Zero evidence. The interesting thing is, I did an admittedly unscientific survey of news articles on vaping, and based on word count, they're focused like a laser on nicotine, the risks of which have been well documented for a long time, and they're not as bad as you've probably been led to believe, but I'm getting ahead of myself. As far as the risks of vaping itself, there simply isn't enough long-term data to know for sure. If I had to make an educated guess, based on how your lungs work, inhaling anything that isn't air is probably not as good for you as inhaling pure air. On the other hand, e-liquid generally contains two FDA-approved, non-toxic, water-soluble organic fluids, sometimes only one of the two, and optionally nicotine and flavorings. The two fluids are vegetable glycerin, abbreviated in the vaping context as VG, and propylene glycol, abbreviated as PG. I have actually heard anti-vaping radicals claim that PG is the highly toxic ingredient in antifreeze, and that is a flat-out lie. That's ethylene glycol, and despite the similarity in name, they are two completely different chemicals. Propylene glycol is widely used as a food additive and a delivery medium for medicine, so it seems highly unlikely that vaping is as bad for you as the mixture of soot and deadly chemicals in cigarette smoke. There have been some stories about people having serious reactions to e-liquid, but I would advise fact-checking those stories yourself before you take them at face value. Some of them, especially on social media, are pure fabrication. A lot of them are speculation without a link between the health issues in vaping ever being established or are linked to toxic contaminants in counterfeit or low-quality e-liquid. A few of them appear to be legitimate, but it's not uncommon for an individual to have an adverse reaction to something that has no effect on most others. Hundreds of people die from food allergies every year in the United States alone, and the most common among those are peanut allergies. But nobody's suggesting that peanuts are a menace to the population as a whole, or that they should be banned. Having said that, anecdotes and educated guesses are not science. I want to be crystal clear that my hypothesis about the level of risk from vaping is speculation. But if someone tells you unequivocally that vaping is worse than smoking cigarettes, they're just fear-mongering for fun and profit, and they're almost certainly wrong. Likewise, if someone says vaping is totally risk-free, they're engaging in wishful thinking, and they're almost certainly wrong too, but they're probably closer to the truth than the fear-mongers. So back to the elephant in the room, nicotine. While it doesn't cause cancer, nicotine does have other physiological effects, so let's talk about that. First, exposure to nicotine can cause developmental issues from conception through adolescence. It crosses the placenta and is found in the breast milk of mothers who ingest it, so if you're pregnant or nursing, definitely avoid nicotine. And it's certainly reasonable to prohibit the sale of nicotine to minors. However, in adults, nicotine actually increases cognitive performance, and we'll see why that's important in a moment. Number 2, nicotine temporarily elevates blood pressure, but so do lots of things that are benign or even beneficial. If you have chronic hypertension, you should avoid nicotine, but the effect isn't particularly harmful to anyone else. 3, nicotine stimulates cell growth. If you have cancer of any kind, absolutely avoid nicotine at all costs. But again, for otherwise healthy people, it's no big deal. 4, nicotine is addictive. But so what? Well, if you're healthy and you use nicotine and you later get pregnant or develop high blood pressure or cancer from other causes, nicotine will be one of the hardest habits your doctor tells you to break. But that's a risk you need to weigh against the benefit of improved cognitive function. And there are some other effects, but at anything less than extreme dosages, they're barely measurable or at least insignificant in comparison. So why has the focus shifted from cigarette smoking, which clearly poses a profound health risk, to nicotine, which has a much narrower and less severe set of risks? Well, I don't believe there's a single cohesive group of Illuminati who conspire to control the fate of humanity. But if they did exist, I can imagine how the meeting went. Big Pharma says to Big Tobacco, Hey, about those cigarettes. We really appreciate how you got your customers hooked on a product that made them sick and then lied about it for decades. We made a killing off that. Nice work. But then the military-industrial complex chimes in and says, unfortunately, we just found out that in the process, you've been making them smarter. We can't have that. Now, you don't need to believe in conspiracies to understand that people being addicted to a substance that makes them smarter is intolerable to anyone who makes their living by ripping you off. Politicians, bureaucrats, demagogues, greedy and corrupt corporate boards and executives, advertisers, religious leaders who employ cult-like tactics, the list of people who have a powerful motive to demonize nicotine goes on and on. So, if you recognize the anti-nicotine movement for what it is and you object to oppression, or if you just want to protect your right to vape, what can you do about it? First, like and share this video, obviously. But more importantly, contact your elected representatives, federal, state, and, if applicable, local. At the federal level, the administrators of the FDA and EPA are appointed by the president and approved by Congress. So while they aren't elected, the people who sign their paychecks are. Tell the people that you contact that reasonable controls are fine. As I mentioned earlier, absolutely prohibit the sale of nicotine products to minors and enforce quality standards to prevent toxic contamination of e-liquid the same as we do for food, drinks, medicine, and anything else we ingest. But make it equally clear that you will not tolerate draconian legislation or regulation like vaping bans, and that you will hold them accountable at the ballot box. Anyway, that's all for now, but we'll talk again soon.